Hi everyone, my name is Paul Jensen. I work and live in London. So my title today is from LNUG presentation to published book. This is kind of like a little bit of a homecoming. This is the first time I've been here since LNUG moved to these offices. So basically there's kind of three parts. How did the book happen? What was it like writing the book? And things I've learned that I can pass on to anyone who wants to write a book. So I guess starting with the first part, how did this book happen? Ironically, it happened because I did a talk at LNUG way back about just under 3 years ago, June 2014. Then it was at the Hoxton Village Hall in Hoxton Square. We'd used a project called Node Webkit. It was a cross-platform framework for doing desktop applications with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. I really enjoyed using it on a project that we had, so I decided to give a talk about it. And then, here was the talk title. And the app in question was this application for the British Medical Journal. So they have this conference every year, and as part of the materials that they offer and sell, they produce a desktop application that they give to people that want to buy it, health organizations around the world. It shows videos from the conference, different session posters, other handouts as well. And I can tell you now, the USB sticks that we used to carry them on, and given the retail price, they're probably the most expensive USB sticks I've ever handled in my life. But it was a great app. Originally, it was on Adobe Air. It used to be the case you had to make sure that you had Flash installed. You had to make sure that you could find the folder on the USB to load the videos from. And then when we moved to this, we didn't have to do any of that. It was a much nicer experience. So after I gave the talk at LNUG, put the slides online, and I thought, that's nice. I'll put them up on Speaker Deck, which was run by OrderedList, who then got acquired by GitHub. We got a couple of views, about 580 as of last Saturday, so this is about 3 years' time. Compare and contrast that to SlideShare, owned or bought by LinkedIn, and then who has since been bought by Microsoft. And a number right down there at the very bottom, 31,141 views. Way more than Speaker Deck. A couple of months after I'd given the talk, I'd noticed that a few people on Twitter were posting out the links, and I knew that this wasn't anything to do with my Twitter account, because I only had like 300 people following me on Twitter. So it wasn't really off the back of what I'd done there. It was someone discovering it and going, hey, this is great, blah, 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 blah. Network effects. I remember checking then that the deck on SlideShare had racked up about 20,000 views by about October 2014. So a couple of months later, the network effect had kicked in. And I was trying to get at that data for this talk, but unfortunately, you can only get up to about a year's worth of data on SlideShare that I could access. So the data that I looked at from May last year to May this year on that talk, what it shows you is that basically the biggest traffic source really there is referral traffic. And one of the URLs where it's being shared the most is a service called Scoop.it, which is like a content marketing platform used both for getting content produced and pushed out there, but also for finding content and going, this is what people want to read about. And in terms of the countries, it's predominantly the United States, then it's India, Germany, the Russian Federation, and France. And then off the back of that, I thought, that's really good. That's really nice. But then in December 2014, I received an email from Manning Publications, and they said to me, we're thinking about writing a book about Node Webkit, and we came across you, and we wanted to know if you would like to write the book. And I said, yeah, I'll do it. And then the rest is history. Number 2, writing the book. Now, there's 3 parts to it. What it takes to write a book, what the process is like, and the challenges of writing a book on both NW.js and Electron and Node.js in general. Now, before I began the process, I had a meeting with various people in Manning on Skype, including one of the co-owners of Manning. And he offered up this really interesting pearl of wisdom. He said to me, I have worked with Nobel Prize winners, and they will tell you that writing a book is the hardest thing that they've ever done. And then he was kind of like going, you still want to do this? I was like, yeah, how can it be? And I can now tell you that, that is so true. That whole experience of the last 2 years of trying to write the book has taught me that is very much grounded in reality. The people at Manning were saying that, if you want to write a book, they recommend spending at least 15 hours per week, which is like 3 hours per work day, trying to work on it. It's a lot of time. It's a huge commitment, especially if you've got a family or anything like that. And so in my case, my experience, I wasn't so much of a weekday worker. I was more of a weekend worker. So what I ended up doing was I was working weekends, I was working on holiday in Iceland, Italy, New York, Amsterdam, on trains, in a car, in lunch breaks at work, every bit of free time I could get. A couple of nice pictures I can show you. So this is Thingvellir Valley in Iceland. It's the largest natural lake in Iceland. It's very beautiful. And I think I was in that car, I was just writing the book. So I was like, oh, that looks nice. And turns out those big ridges, that's where they filmed Game of Thrones, where they do like the sort of Icelandic episodes. I say snowy episodes. Italy as well, very beautiful. Again, I had to write a book there. New York, very nice. I gave a talk about Socket Stream there at the UN. Also had to write a book there. And North Amsterdam, beautiful, picturesque. Also had to write a book, and also discovered strip waffles and Belgian beer, which I'll explain when I put some make later. Point is, you cannot underestimate how much time you're going to need in order to write a book. It really is a huge, huge time commitment. But anyway, second thing I've learned is that you've got to identify your core audience earlier on. And you have to write with the mindset of them rather than you. Because you can write and you can go, and it'll make sense to you. It's a bit like when you write code without code comments and everyone else goes, well, what's this? And you kind of go, oh yeah. And then you go, maybe I should put a code comment. But a bit like that. It was sort of like you had to take your step away from writing for yourself and think about what do they need to learn, what would they want to learn, what would be useful to them, and then try to condense all of that into a process for writing the book. Thankfully, the team at Man have lots of people reading it as well, so it's not just you writing it and then going, makes sense to me, makes sense to no one. They actually also sense check you as well, so that's pretty good. And mind maps are your friend. So this was one of the very, very early mind maps I did. It was in fact the first one about NW.js, how to kind of draw these different themes out about things to cover within NW.js. And they kind of help you form threads that you can then expand on and then turn into the backbone that then makes sense for how the chapter is going to be structured. Also kind of the material that you want to flesh out in the chapter as well. Really useful process and very essential to kind of run in the book. And then the process. So in terms of what authoring tools did I use to write the book? Well, you had two options. You could either use an XML format that Manning had, or you could use Microsoft Word. And I will now tell you that Microsoft Word is really good. It really is. I was using it on my Mac. As part of writing the book, I bought a Windows laptop so I could test the desktop apps on Windows. It works seamlessly there. I had it on my iPad. I even had it on my phone. I mean, I was on a train typing the book on an iPad. It was seamless, a really good experience. And also, people who have written before with the XML format, whenever they've had to deal with people kind of making like, oh, I need to change this bit and change that bit, they found that trying to manage all of that in terms of the merging process can be a bit nightmarish. So Microsoft Word is good, trust me. And then you think, okay, so that's a process. I'm just going to write some chapters, put them for a spell check, and go home, if only. Point is, you've got to write a draft. You've got your development editor. She reviews it. In my case, Cynthia. She's going to make some suggestions. She's going to say, this could use a visual. What are you trying to make a point here? Then you basically get this feedback, and then she goes, right, let's do another draft. And you go, and you've got to keep doing that until it gets done. I kind of like this phrase that, there will be multiple drafts. I think this is what they should hand out to all authors. There will be multiple drafts. You're not going to get the first draft and it's going to be like, brilliant, done. And then once you've done that, you get a couple of chapters through, and you get a couple of people that are reviewing your book during that time, and they'll get the whole section of chapters, and they'll read it, and they'll make some suggestions, and then they'll also feed that back into the process. So it does go through a lot of different stages. And then alongside writing the book, you're going to write some promotional materials such as blog posts and animated visuals. Here's an example on Scotch.io, which is like a site where you can read loads of tutorials about how to do various bits and bobs. I created this photo discovery app with NW.js. Basically, I did it in two parts because there was so much of it. They pay you like $250 if you write a big, meaty, chunky thing, and they pay you on PayPal, and it's really nice. I did that when I was in Amsterdam. And that was pretty good. And it was a nice way to also promote the book and go, by the way, I'm writing a book, that's why I'm doing this. And then the marketing team will take that, they'll push it out to their various channels and get it into the pipeline. And then once you're kind of going through that process, and it goes on for a good couple of months, you go through some technical reviewers. And then the technical reviewers get into the process, and then you realize there will be multiple drafts. there will be multiple drafts, because they will find things and they'll go, but you haven't tried on this, and you're like, okay, go back. And then you get a final sweep of tweaks. After you've gone through the technical reviews and they've said, yep, it's all good, you get a grammar person who is going to look through it, read through it, make loads of sentence changes, and then specifically tailor it to a US audience. So I tried to use this example of talking about petrol, and they went to me, oh no, we don't know what petrol is in America, it's gasoline, you got to use gasoline. So it's like finding little things like that where it's like cultural quirks where you're like, that won't make sense to an American audience, and then kind of finding a better example. And that is roughly speaking the process. And now kind of more towards the technical bits. I mean, in terms of the challenges of writing a book in both NW.js and Electron and Node.js in general, the way I can describe it is like, it's like playing a game of whack-a-mole. You have got to write the book faster than the code can change. And I started the process back in about January 2015. And originally, when I did the presentation, it was called Node Webkit. By the time I started the book, it was called NW.js. And the reason why is because IO.js happened. So when IO.js happened, which was a community fork of Node.js to get updates into the platform faster, what happened was that had so much momentum going for it that Node Webkit said, okay, we're going to switch to IO.js. Like, we'll just drop Node. And then Google Chrome switched to Blink, their WebKit fork, which was, you know, a chance to clean up and do new things. So Node Webkit switched to that. And then so eventually there was this like GitHub issue that got fielded, which was like, will Node Webkit be renamed? And it's like, you're doing all this, like pushing out all this material about Node Webkit, you know, presentations, articles, whatever, stuff the SEO, we're going to rename it. So they renamed Node Webkit to NW.js. And this is how the title of the book was initially. That's not the title anymore. And then I decided, okay, I got to explain what IO.js is, because people are going to be writing about Node, they're going to be writing IO.js, you know, which one's which, what's this? And I did that, and I wrote some material, and I put it into the chapters, and then months later, IO.js merged back into Node.js, and, you know, all that material was like, okay, let's just go. And then, yeah, as I said, there will be multiple drafts, and that was one of the reasons why. And then we were getting to around completion of the book around November 2015, and then we were kind of scratching our heads, kind of going, well, you know, the book says it's got good reviews, sales aren't necessarily fitting with that. Do you know what's going on out in the market space? And we came across a project called Atom Shell, and then it turned out that Atom Shell would become Electron. And when we started to dig into it, we realized that actually it was kind of like a fork of Node.js. It turned out the guy who wrote it had worked on NW.js with Roger Wang, Intel in China. He then left, joined GitHub, worked on Atom Shell, and then that became Electron, and that's a huge juggernaut. And it was very similar, you know, in terms of its features and its functionality. You can actually see a lot of similarity in terms of the API design, the sort of code that you could run. And the guys at Manning just said, hey, how about we write about that too? So rather than writing a book on one framework, I ended up writing a book on two, and then the title changed to this. And so we were trying to find like the title that kind of fits best with the book, which meant that the book took about another year to kind of get done. The other thing I learned as well, running a book, is you really have to lock down your module dependencies in code examples, and never assume that semantic versioning is ever being applied to any of the libraries that you're relying on. So for a good example, originally when I was running the book, a lot of it was on NW.js 0.10, which was a very stable version. It's been stable, it's been pretty much left like that for a year. There was a lot of development that was happening on 0.12, not quite yet into stable, and then suddenly it was like 0.12's here, and examples that were working stopped working, had to get them fixed. You know, there weren't tiny changes, there were some significant changes there. So the idea of sort of like semantic versionings, you know, the concept of whether it's minor or major, doesn't always have the same definition across different projects. So you will find that actually you have to lock it down. You really have to lock it down to the bug fix version. And then in terms of that, learnings, you're going to need time, and you have to question what you can commit to. So as I mentioned earlier on SocketStream, I decided at some point during the book writing, I'm going to step away from SocketStream, which was the right thing to do, because trying to do an open source project to maintain that at the same time as writing a book, at the same time as doing a whole bunch of other things that were going on in my life, it was like, nah, can't do that. So you have to kind of cut down and prioritize. And the second one, you will probably gain weight. Now, back in my late 20s, which was a long time ago, I'm actually 30 on Sunday, but I used to be 78 kilos. I remember this. I went to the gym, the weight said you're 78 kilos. And then I went to the gym last week and it said you're 93 kilos. Now, I hope that the machine's wrong, but it might not be. It might be that actual case. And I remember when I was in Amsterdam eating stroop waffles and drinking Belgian beer, and that's probably why I'm close to that number. And in fact, this is not just applied to me. There's also a fellow Manning author, a guy called Marcus Hammerberg. He's the co-author of Manning's Kanban in Action. He has also gained weight when writing the book that he wrote with his co-author, and he talks about how he used to go to cafes a lot and just write it there. So my advice to you is either don't write in cafes or make sure that you also don't sit at the desk for hours a day, because that's what usually happens. And it is a marathon, but you'll be kind of sprinting at times. So this idea of, people talk about it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. Well, actually, there's kind of a third definition. You are going to be doing something continuously, and there's going to be times when you're going to need to meet the deadlines, and you just got to sprint ahead. Writing is not a linear process where the amount of time equals the amount of output. You may find hours where you don't get anything done, really. And then you find times when you're like, you just speed through. And that's why it's so hard, because it actually goes against the grain of how we operate as humans. We imagine that effort is kind of continuously producing stuff that, usually just, you start to see a picture of what you build over time. And it's not like, lots of hours kind of, you go, where have they gone? And then you do eventually get there. To quote a favorite Chinese proverb of mine, a man who removes a mountain starts by removing small stones. It's also quite appropriate because these two frameworks originated in China. And there's one guy who's responsible kind of in some ways for both of them. And I asked him, can I have your foreword? And he said to me, well, I'm happy to write it. My English is not great. I said, I don't care. I just, you're the reason that I'm writing these two books. I was going to write one. It turns out I have to write two now, but, bam. And that's pretty much it. So, here's the book. It's there. I'll put it in a case just to make sure it's tidy. Ta-da! There you go. Done.
Where can we buy it?
Well, actually, it is second prize for the contest today. It's, so best tweets. Tweet a photo.
Yeah, on Twitter.
Cool. So my Twitter is Paul Jensen. And before I disappear, I just want to quickly plug the company where I work, StarCount. We are hiring. We are a consumer insights company. We have got information on over a billion people, which we're using to help better understand customers of businesses. We have an interesting pipeline of work that we're trying to work on to build a really good way of doing this at massive scale, but also much faster. We have a number of roles that we're hiring for. If any of you are interested, come talk to me. I'll be happy to tell you all about it, but that's all. I would say this is a really interesting question because depending on which part of the world, there is a very active NW.js community in China. The WeChat SDK is actually built in NW.js, so they seem to have a very, very good grip on that platform and understanding that. But I think here it's really Electron. Electron has a lot more documentation, a lot more corporate sponsorship through GitHub. The apps, one of the apps that we've worked on at StarCount has Electron. And that's been good for being able to run on multiple platforms. Our clients are running Windows, like really old versions of Windows, and it's sort of like allows us to at least support Windows 7. XP it doesn't support. If you need XP support, run NW.js, but hopefully no one does. Obviously, because our last couple of weeks we found out that there's versions of XP running around in places like MRI machines and submarines and that sort of thing. Sorry.
I buy a lot of money's book, most of them in the NEAP program. How that influenced your production of the book?
So you bought a lot of books. Are you on the Manning Authors program? How did it influence?
I know there's like forums and people can actually contribute by reading the early drafts.
So I got quite a few sort of suggestions. Someone said, why are you using... I think I tried to use Zepto at one point early on in one of the examples, and he said, why are you using Zepto? You should use jQuery, that's what everyone uses. And I kind of was like, it's smaller. My decision was because it was a smaller payload in terms of size. And then in the end, I ended up rewriting it because to support both the frameworks with the same code base, I just stripped out the jQuery dependency altogether, or Zepto jQuery dependency. So there were lots of little suggestions like that. There were things where, there was some feedback about this example doesn't make sense to me, like, and then you'd have to kind of revisit it. A few little tweak suggestions, and also sort of just coverage as well. The really hardest thing is actually when you are producing a book and you get towards the end and you're like, you're done, and then someone says, I want to know more about WebView, and you have to go, I'm really sorry, it's not in the book, but here's a links documentation on that particular API. Because you can't, if you tried to cover everything across both those frameworks, I'd still be writing the book and I'd probably have more gray hairs, like it'd just be a never ending story. So you have to make choices in that respect. So I think that's the hard thing is really when you think you've locked it all down and then you do find that there's some people that just want that tiny bit more. So yeah.